Hi, this is Aditya and welcome to Sankham MarTech channel. In this video, I am going to talk about AEM Author instance, Publish instance and also AEM Dispatcher. If you are an AEM developer and want to know how to debug any issue which you might get in the production, then you must watch this video until the end. If you are liking the videos which I am doing, please subscribe to my channel and also please hit on that like button. If you want me to do videos on any specific topic in AEM, then please put that out in comment section and I'll try to do those videos whenever I get some time. Let's get started with the presentation. As I have already told in my previous videos, the pages in AEM are created out of the components. So it is just the assembly of these components which are creating this particular page. So this we have already covered in our previous videos. So now what is this component? So what is this particular component breadcrumb now? So it is nothing but a snippet of the HTML code, JavaScript and CSS combined to be able to generate this particular layout which we are seeing here. Okay, so it is nothing but a code. So this code is written by AEM developers. So let's say what is the development process which we follow generally in any of the AEM projects. It is very important to understand this process, particularly if you are new to the web development world. Let us understand as to how this particular process works. Okay, so the developer 1, developer 2 and developer 3 will work on their individual systems and will be developing the code related to certain servlet or the component. Okay, so once the development is done, they'll push their code into the source repository. Okay, source repository is a website kind of thing which contains code written by all the developers. So what is the purpose of this source repository? The purpose of the source repository is to just resolve the conflicts if any. Okay, so let us suppose this particular developer is working on the component 1 and this particular developer also wants to work on the component 1. And this person is doing the update from his end and this person is also adding one more feature on the same component. Then how do we merge these two codes so that the feature developed by one person will not override the feature developed by other person? Okay, it's just to maintain the code, merge it properly and maintain one source of truth. We use this source repository. Okay, source repository looks something like this. It's just like a website which contains all the source code files. Okay, if you see here bundle.bundle/core, if you go into this, it contains just the source code files. Okay, so this is how we maintain and merge all the code into one repository. Okay, so then once it is merged, then what happens is a build will trigger. Okay, so this is called as continuous integration and continuous deployment server. Okay, CACD. Okay, so what this does is once the code is merged, a build gets triggered and then what happens is this entire code which you are seeing here will get compiled. Okay, will get compiled and all the unit tests will get run and all the integration tests also will get run, and then if they are successful, then finally it will create a package. Okay, package is just like a zip of all this code which is existing here. So it will just zip all that code and then what happens is it gets deployed onto both AEM Author and Publish instance. So whenever there is a code build, we are deploying code both onto AEM Author instance and AEM Publish instance, both. Okay, so this is how the code gets deployed. Okay, so now the next obvious question is, what is this AEM Author and Publish instance? Okay, so what is the need for two instances, Author and Publish? So this is the explanation. Okay, so AEM Author environment is the AEM Author environment, AEM Publish environment, both are just the same AEM application. Okay, so we install one AEM application in one server and another AEM application in another server, and we call one server as author and another server as publish. Okay, so the only difference between author and publish is in the author environment, the authors will be able to create the page, add the new components, edit the existing components, change the layout, etc. But in publish environment, they will not be able to do any of those. Okay, so why should we need these two environments first of all? Okay, so the reason for that is the author, when he is creating the page, he will keeps adding it, right? He keeps adding the components, editing the components. So because of all those edits which the author is doing, the website shouldn't get impacted. That is the reason we separate this author environment and publish environment. And what we say is author will develop or create the pages and creates the layout, everything he does in the author environment, and once everything is done, then he will just publish that into the publish environment, so that already created page and well layouted and well structured page and ready to go for production will be published onto the publish environment. And once published onto this publish environment, then end user will be able to see it. Okay, so until it is in the development stage and when the author is authoring, adding the components to the page and creating the layout, then end user will not be able to see all those. So once everything is done, then publish it, and then only the end user will be able to see. So that is the reason why we are distinguishing these two environments as author and publish. And the publishing of this page from author environment to publish environment happens through something called as replication agents. So replication agents are just some kind of code which is running on the author instance. Okay, and this code will get triggered, and then this code is responsible for copying the page from this environment and pasting it onto this environment. Okay, so how do we publish it? So this is how the page looks like. So you go to this sites.html and you go to this path by clicking on these things, and you select the page which you have edited just now and which you wanted to publish. You just select it, and here you click on this quick publish button. And once you click on this quick publish button, then this replication agents will get triggered. Okay, and what it does is it will first package this particular code, this particular page. It will package this particular page. Okay, so the package is nothing but a zip file. Okay, it just looks like this zip file. Okay, and what does this zip file contain? Okay, if you see on this right hand side, this zip file contains this path JCR root content weekend language master EN about us. It is the same path which we have seen here, content weekend language master and EN, and ultimately it contains this content page. Okay, this content file in which this page which you are seeing here, this about us page, is described as a JSON format. Okay, this is how it looks like. So as I told, everything in AEM is ultimately stored as a file in the Java content repository. So be it either a page or the code, whatever you are creating as part of the AEM is ultimately stored as part of the file system, which is the JCR content repository. Okay, so if you see here how exactly this page which is being rendered as a HTML is actually stored as the JSON, right? So if you see here, there is a Sling resource type which is weekend component page, right? So as we have seen earlier, the page is nothing but just the combination of the components. So once you add the component, each component has a reference to the Sling resource type, and that's how the AEM knows which code to execute and how to render the page. So all that description the page contains is what all components are added, that list of the components, and what is the Sling resource type for that particular component. That makes up this page which you are seeing here. Okay, so that is this page, and the rendering process is taken care by AEM by going into this Sling resource type and actually reading the HTML code of it. Okay, so now this code, this file which you are seeing here is packaged as a zip file here. Okay, and then this zip file will get published onto this AEM publish environment using replication agents. Okay, so on the AEM publish environment, what happens is there will be a servlet called /bin and /receive. Okay, so this is the URL path, and an API call will be given to this URL path, and this packaged file, this zip file which you have seen earlier, will be passed on to this particular path. And then this code here, which is existing in this location at /bin and /receive, this servlet code will get triggered, and it will take that package and actually installs it in the publish environment, so that that new page which you have created in the author environment will get replicated onto publish environment. And once it is on the publish environment, the end user will be able to see it. Okay, so this is the flow from author to publish. So now let's try to understand as to how the end user is able to see the published content which is existing on the publish environment. Okay, so this is the flow which explains how the page is rendered. Okay, so let us suppose we have the end user here. He opens up the browser and he enters this URL. So https://hostname, which is like google.com or any of the host name, right? Your company name, your company host name, and then /country, /language, and /home. This is some path which he has given to access the home page, let us suppose. Okay, so then first thing what happens is this request will go to the CDN networks. CDNs are nothing but the content delivery networks like Cloudflare or Akamai. What is the purpose of this content delivery network? Okay, so these content delivery networks are just servers which are existing all over the world. So let us suppose this end user is in Hyderabad in India. Okay, so then once the request is given, so once this URL is typed in the browser, then the first request goes to the nearest CDN. It might be a location in Mumbai, or it could be a location in Hyderabad itself. Okay, so CDNs are all over the world. Okay, it's a network of the computers. The purpose of this network is to cache the files. Okay, so let us suppose our server is actually in some let us suppose this publish instance which is there is in some North America. Okay, and request is originating from India. Now the request has to all the way travel through the network to North America and download the CSS files and JavaScript files, right? It will take a lot of time. Instead of that, what if we can cache all these CSS and JavaScript files on CDN, and instead of every time coming onto this publish instance and getting the code and rendered to the end user, what if we are able to serve everything from the CDN itself? It will improve the page performance and it will reduce the page load times. Okay, so that is the purpose of CDN. Okay, every asset like images, videos, CSS files, JavaScript files, and all the static assets get cached on this CDN. And whenever the request originates, instead of downloading the file like a big video file from the publish instance all the way from North America onto India, it will serve that video, the same video, that cached video from the CDN network. Okay, so that is the purpose of the CDN. It caches all the static files. Okay, so once it goes to the CDN, if it is available here, if the page is available here, then it just will pass that page to the page back to the browser and it gets rendered here. Okay, so let us suppose the page is not available here. Then the request goes to load balancer. So what is the job of this load balancer? So load balancer balances the load between the dispatchers. Okay, this is the AEM Dispatcher instances. Okay, so AEM Dispatcher. So what is this AEM Dispatcher? AEM Dispatcher is just part of a Apache web server. Okay, it is just a part of the web server. This is actually Apache web server, and Apache web server, as part of the Apache web server, we have this dispatcher running, AEM Dispatcher running. Okay, and this load balancer, the job of this load balancer is to see if this dispatcher is already busy, then the request will go to this dispatcher. So whatever is not already busy, it will just balance the load between these multiple dispatcher instances which are available. Okay, so that is the purpose of this load balancer. This dispatcher, as I told, is part of the Apache web server. Okay, so then what is part of this Apache web server is something called as rewrite rules. Okay, so what is the purpose of these rewrite rules? Okay, so let us suppose now the path given by the user is country, lang and home, and this is the path of the home page in eyes of this end user. But actual URL path in the AEM could be something different. It could be like this, right? So content, weekend, language master, EN, and then home page. Home page might be as part of somewhere here, right? So what we are trying to do essentially is we are trying to mask this site structure, this AEM site structure for security purposes. Okay, we don't want to reveal our site structure to the end user. So we mask it using rewrite tools. We say basically that if the user enters this particular path, then map this particular path onto this URL in AEM. So the actual URL which goes to the AEM instance is this path, okay, and not the user entered path. Okay, so the user entered path is mapped to that particular AEM path using rewrite rules. So that is the purpose of rewrite rules, and this is part of Apache web server. And what is also part of Apache web server is this dispatcher. Okay, so now let's see what is the purpose of this dispatcher. The first purpose of this AEM dispatcher is to cache the HTML pages. So to understand this better, let's try to see what happens if this dispatcher is not there. If this dispatcher is not there, then AEM must first identify what is the page which is being requested. Then it has to open that page, see what are all the components which are making that particular page. Then go to the code of each and every component and render the HTML of each and every component, assemble it onto the page, and then send the response to the end user. So every time the request comes, if all this process is happening, then the first thing is there is too much load on the AEM publish instance, and also it is a very slow process that each time the request comes we have to concatenate all the HTML code of each and every component and then render the page and send the response. Instead of doing all that, what we are going to do is, once the page is generated for that particular path, we are going to cache that HTML page as part of the dispatcher, so that the request can be directly served from the dispatcher itself. So the cached HTML pages will directly be sent to the end user instead of hitting the AEM publish instance. Okay, so that is the first purpose of the dispatcher. Then the second purpose is to define what are allowed paths. Like for example, there could be certain paths which end user should not be querying, maybe for security reasons, right? So what are all the paths which user can request? So those can be defined as part of the dispatcher, and any other paths, if they are being requested, will give the 404 error. Okay, so that's how we do these allowed paths and define these allowed paths in the dispatcher, and that is another purpose of it. Then another purpose apart from the allowed path which dispatcher has is to do a load balancing. Okay, so the load balancer here, this is the external load balancer like Akamai again. Okay, so this load balancer, the purpose of this is to load balance between the dispatchers, but dispatcher also can do the load balancing, and this time this dispatcher does the load balancing between the publish instance. Okay, and the relation between the dispatcher to the publish instance is 1:m. Okay, one dispatcher can contain or load balance multiple publish instances. Okay, and the load balancing concept is same. Based on the load, it just balances the amount of the requests which are coming to the dispatcher. Okay, so that is the purpose. Okay, so then when does the request actually come to the publish instance? So in two instances, the request actually comes to the publish instance. Okay, one is if the page is not cached already in the dispatcher, then the request comes onto the publish instance. Okay, and the second reason why it comes to the publish instance is there are certain dynamic URLs. Okay, for example, if this URL contains a question mark and some x equal to 1 on some parameters in the URL, right? So then AEM assumes that this is a page which has to be rendered dynamically on demand, because there are query parameters within the URL, like $x equal to 1, y equal to 2, something like that. Okay, and those query parameters have to be sent onto the server, and the page has to be rendered dynamically based on the query parameters. So that's how the publish instance, that's how the dispatcher will assume, and then it will pass the request onto the publish instance, and based on the query parameters, then it will generate the page dynamically and then send it. So if it sees any question mark in the page URL, then dispatcher will not serve that request, and the request will be passed on to the publish instance. And the third reason why the dispatcher sends it to the publish instance is, we might have defined as to what paths should not be served by the dispatcher. So that we can define or configure as part of this dispatcher, and those paths which are configured not to be served by the dispatcher will also go to the publish instance. Okay, so all this configuration we do as part of the AEM dispatcher. Okay, so then once this publish instance is here, okay, this publish instance, once the request comes to this publish instance will generate the HTML response, and it will actually serve it onto the user. Now the question, let us suppose this developer has developed a particular component and he has deployed the code onto the production. Okay, and in the production, the end user is unable to see the newly added component on the page. How do you debug this issue? Okay, so now the issue could be at the CDN, issue could be at the dispatcher, at the publish instance or author instance. So we need to go step by step. So for that, you need to know the purpose of each and every of these things, and you need to be able to identify where exactly the issue is, and then only you can fix it. So what is the step-by-step process to do it? Okay, as you can see here, the code is being deployed by our continuous deployment server like Bamboo or Jenkins, right? So the first thing which we need to test is whether the code got deployed onto the publish instance or not. We have developed the new component, but did it get properly deployed to our publish instance? That is the first thing which we need to check. Okay, so then second thing which we need to check is the page which is being authored by the author is actually being published onto the publish instance. So the page is coming from the author instance, and the code is coming from this continuous deployment servers. So the second thing which we need to check is whether the page has been properly published or not. So once these two things are done, then so now the code is also available and the page is also available, let us suppose. Okay, so then you have to open this publish instance directly, open the URL of this publish instance directly, and open the page and see if the page is being rendered properly, if you hit the direct publish instance or not. Then if this is also working in the publish instance, all the available publish instances you must check, and if on all the publish instances page is rendering properly, then it might be the issue that the dispatcher has cached the wrong version of the HTML, maybe the old version of the HTML. So clear cache this dispatcher and let the dispatcher fetch the latest HTML code again from the publish instance and cache it here. That will solve the issue. And if that also hasn't solved the issue, then the issue might be at the CDN. Maybe the wrong page has been cached at the CDN networks. So what you do is clear cache the CDN also, and let the CDN get the latest HTML file from the dispatcher. Then once the CDN also has the latest HTML file, then the issue should get resolved. So this is how you go step by step to be able to debug and identify where exactly the issue is. And you must almost mug up this entire flow so that whenever there is an issue, you'll be able to follow this particular flow and be able to identify where exactly the issue is. If you are liking the videos which I am doing, please subscribe to my channel and please hit on the like button. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment sections. Thank you.